possibly give you that
Now, there's
idea.
multiple arguments going on up here, Mayor, and Councilman Baines even acknowledged that some of us have some decent questions, right? Although we disagree. But Mayor, I'm being honest, and I'm just being honest. You know, I'm just going to throw my cards on the table. I was really offended. You and I talked about the billboards, the KMJ advertising, all the stuff last year that I felt was really divisive. You're asking North Fresno to, be put in a bad spot. I represent North Fresno. You live in North Fresno. Were you happy with that ad campaign last year? And do you think Building Healthy Communities is the right agency to be put in charge of public outreach now?
So I was the target and the subject, as were, all of us, of that campaign. And I'll be candid, it definitely stung. And yet, after I got past the sting of it, I had to ask myself, so what are the issues that are being raised here? I can get past my personal offense and really look at what is this community group trying to say? And in doing so, I think they raised really good points. I think they raised really good points about the fact that we are one city, and yet people who live in older parts of the city experience something very different day in and day out than people who do in newer parts of the city. And it's to no fault of the people who live in newer parts of the city. Development standards have changed, and now we are smarter now as a city, and we require that as a new neighborhood is being built, that it has to include better park standards and better park amenities. So that's great. So we've at least stopped the problem from getting worse. But now we have to ask ourselves, how do we deal with the parts of the city that were built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, when those park standards weren't in place? And that is a conversation that I believe the entire city should be talking about. And the fact doesn't escape me that people in North Fresno, not far from where you and I live, we can point to a whole lot of deficient infrastructure that exists in our parks and our open space as well. So while there was some initial, a little bit of a sucker punch sort of feeling, I was able to move past that and just be like, hey, I want to hear what's being raised, I want to hear what's being said, and ultimately look at what's in the best interest of the city as a whole. I want to just comment briefly to a question that Councilmember Soria raised in your question about why were we not forthright about wanting to do additional outreach when we brought the master plan contract forward. I take responsibility for this, and I stand by this decision. At the beginning of this year, as I looked at my last 12 months, and I looked at my bucket list of things I wanted to accomplish as mayor and what I ran on 8 years ago, some of those items were set back because we had 5 years of recession to deal with. And from 2009 to 2013, we did nothing but cut and manage and cut and manage and move a lot of good things forward at the same time. We got through that in 2013, and we are playing catch up. For many of the items I wanted to address, I talked about a citywide Parks and Trails master plan as a candidate in 2008. I talked about not just do the plan and put it on a shelf, but how do we actually implement it? How do we build it out? Now, 8 years go by. I'm much more experienced in this work. I know what it takes to move things through to implementation, arguably better than probably many people have held this office in prior administrations. I know what it takes. And it takes a level of communication and outreach and connecting with the public that doesn't usually get done well by engineering consultants who are incredibly expert at assessing the quality of infrastructure, the age of assets, and the costs associated with improving those assets. We don't communicate well as a building. We are government people. We don't communicate well. So in January of this year, I sat down with my team with a list of projects, and I said, okay, guys, what do we have in us to get done in this last 12 months? We took on a couple of additional things, one of which I haven't even told you guys about yet. So guess what? There is another surprise coming, but it's a good one.
A November surprise?
It's a good one. And, we'll see what the outcome of this is. But as mayor and with the charter authority I have to lead this city, to establish priorities, and to move the administration forward, I directed my staff to do supplemental work on community outreach when it comes to the Parks and Master Plan update, because I see the bigger picture. Now, do I want that approach to offend my colleague on the council? Of course not. Of course not. Am I happy that you felt like that came as a surprise and it wasn't true? No, that's not at all the intent, nor would I ever want it to be. But I do stand by the decision, and I do stand by this council item before you, and I urge your your support, and I urge Council President for a vote. Call for a vote.
Well,
That's
Mayor,
not mine to call, but,
now, Mayor,
but I do urge your support.
That's a good idea, but I'm so patient, but I just want 3 minutes, and I'll put the timer on for my comments. But
Okay.
So we would call the question, but for one
Okay.
opportunity.
Sorry, and I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Councilmember
but-
Brandau.
Okay, Mayor, and so when I called you up, I understand you wanted to address Councilmember Soria's concerns, well, you had the chance, so that's cool, I'm fine with that. But here's what I want to know still, I want you to tell me the answer to this question. You know, I feel, maybe that impact of the emotional impact of that campaign that they had, it was, I don't want to say it was racist, but there was an element there. And you know, North Fresno, we've sat back and we've allowed and participated, and even council members supporting a lot of stuff in South Fresno. You'd have to acknowledge that. Your 8 years have been fantastic about revitalizing a lot of the center and south of Fresno. But then in the last year of your tenure, to allow Building Healthy Communities to go out and rub North Fresno's nose in it and make it sound as if we haven't done enough, if there's still they are to blame for problems. And by the way, when you just answered about development, you and I get that. But Building Healthy Communities never told that part of the story. All they did was put up the billboard that disparages emotionally North Fresno. Now, I know that there are people in North Fresno that can understand it all, but a lot of them don't, right? And what they think is, gentlemen and gentlewomen, what they think is that we spend a lot of tax dollars. We spend a lot of tax dollars in here. We still get attacked, you know. And we're on. We want to see downtown developed. We want to see the center parks go in your district, Clint's district, and yet no new parks in North Fresno. We get it yet. All these things, and I voted for every one of them, and then still North Fresno gets blamed.
So first of all, just to reiterate, and I think it's abundantly clear that it is not included in this scope of work that there is geographic disparity and name calling and shaming of any part of the city, north or south, right?
But Building Healthy Communities is sitting right there, and they weren't able to tell me that they would that they denied that campaign.
Councilmember Brandau, withhold support from this item. I completely.
Well, I am going to withhold support from the item.
Imagine my shock.
But will you tell me that the 2 months that you're mayor, you'll make sure that they don't pull any of those stunts?
We're going to be under contract with a group of consultants and 2 subs who have a limited scope. We don't control the additional work that Suzanne Bertz-Rosa may take on or Carrie Catalano may take on, right? I'm not going to direct, you know, as long as you're a small sub on a small dollar item in the city of Fresno, you can't express your views on other issues throughout the city. No, I am actually excited about this team because I think they each bring unique qualifications. There is no other organization, nonprofit or for-profit or otherwise, that I would look to say, look, I need you to go out, knock on doors, talk to people, grassroots, shopping malls, schools, soccer games, everywhere. Frankly, even though we haven't always agreed on the conversations or the outcomes of those conversations, we, I think, can admit they actually do it better than probably anybody around.
Well,
so
that
why
doesn't
wouldn't
surprise me,
as I
because
represent,
that's not a high bar either.
But as I represent the whole city of Fresno, why wouldn't I want the best team and the best group coming together?
And that's why you should turn around, if this is going to pass, and you should ask Building Healthy Communities to make sure when they're in those shopping malls, at those schools, meeting with people in the evenings, that they're not saying, you know, it's time for North Fresno to give it up. That's, you know, that you are in charge, and if you're just going to pass today.
Councilmember Brandau, there is no doubt in my mind. It is clear in the scope of work. It is clear in the draft contracts. It is clear in the many meetings and conversations that my staff has had with this coalition. They know what their charge is. It is to assess people's response. For example, I'd love to hear from people in North Fresno. How do you think your park systems are working for you? How do you like your trail access to trails? Have you ever tried to get from here to there on a trail?